Hello, hello! Editing Ben here, and I want to stop in and give a few short messages before tonight's episode. First of all, the Worldwide Write-a-thon is taking place in 2 weekends. That's the weekend of October 21st. I will be hosting one of the productivity sprints during that time, specifically the time slot from the 3 to 5:30 a.m. my time, which is the Eastern time zone. So feel free to join in and watch me try to get down as many words as I can while I'm sleep deprived and exhausted. If you are an early riser, or more likely in the UK and African time zones where that's a little bit later in the day, come in and join on the fun. Also, as of this video, I am looking for betas and arcs for the second book in my Into the Void series. So please reach out to me either on YouTube or DM me on Instagram, or just send an email to writingtowrite@gmail.com if you're interested. This continues the journey of Rachel, Tracy, and Derek as they reconcile with the events of the first book, namely a giant monster attack where everyone discovered that they have superhuman powers. They're also trying to reclaim and understand what having those powers mean with respect to living out their everyday lives, as they also work to regain the time they lost in the first book. Lastly, as we're winding down on the 3rd season of Running to Write, I have a big announcement for the 4th season. I am overhauling my channel and a lot of details about it, which include the intro and outro. New versions of those were created by Books by Adrian, and I am excited to show them off because they are marvelous. So in, I think, 3 episodes now will be the first episode of season 4, and you'll be able to check it out. I hope to see you during my productivity sprint of the Worldwide Write-a-thon, and I hope that I've piqued your interest in becoming a beta or arc reader for the second book in my Into the Void series. Take care and enjoy tonight's episode. Hello, hello! I'm Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. I'm recording this the week after my debut novel, Falling Through, is available, so it's probably October now by the time you're watching this. My book's been out for 2 months, and if you haven't checked it out or picked up your own copy, go for it. It's called Falling Through. It follows the adventures of Derek and his friends as they grapple with their newfound superpowers and create a monster which hunts after them as they travel across time. I hope you like it. With my shameless plug out of the way, this week's episode is a follow-up to last week's spoiler-free review of the Codex Alera. Now it's time for some juicy spoilers across the series as I highlight its best features and some of its greatest flaws. For those who don't want to be spoiled, this is your last chance to go into a read of it without being forewarned of what's to come. I'm going to start off with a big spoiler, so get ready in 3, 2, 1. One more second, and go. One of my favorite scenes was a violent one. In the 3rd or 4th book, the main character Tavi is put in command of a military force as he's defending against an invading army with superior numbers who are also considerably better trained. In an earlier scene, Tavi used a glass lens to fake being able to craft with fire. Now, during the climactic moment and my favorite scene, he applies that on a much grander scale using his wit and creativity to defeat an army that no one thought he could. He has a strong crafter fly high into the sky and create a giant lens. Using this as a magnifying glass, he burns tens of thousands of enemies. There are some titanic forces across the series, from intentionally causing a volcano to explode and destroy a city filled with civilians, to riding across the ocean on giant icebergs merged with boats, to essentially creating highways in the ancient world. Yet that moment of bending light to obliterate the enemies was an instance of creative genius for the magic system. That being said, I found Tavi to overall be lacking as a character. From the moment we're introduced to him, he is seen as rare for how quote-unquote normal he is. Every other human in this fantasy realm has the ability to craft magic or tame furies, even if a little. Thus, my initial thought about Tavi was that he was special because he was some secret heir whose power was too strong to be contained, and so it only appeared that he had no powers because he was so far beyond everyone's understanding. Then, because I was watching Black Clover at the time, I thought he was able to somehow negate everyone's magic. I still knew that he was the secret heir, but I thought it would be an interesting twist if he were the only person on the planet or across the realm who could cancel out somebody else's magic, and that will make him more than just special, it will make him unique. My last explanation while I was reading this for why Tavi didn't have powers, despite clearly having the ability to do so, was that they were being siphoned off by the local Great Fury, Mount Gyrados. Instead of taming some small, weak Furies like everyone else, his powers were being pushed off and used to bend a Great Fury to his will, and that would give him world-shattering abilities. Personally, any of these three explanations were more interesting than what actually happened. It turns out Tavi's mother acted selfishly and out of fear, so that she was blocking any potential Fury from bonding with her son, so that way he would seem less than normal and no one would assume he's the long-lost prince. The reasons for her doing so were flimsy at best and amounted to her not trusting anyone after her husband was murdered by those with political power. I cannot reiterate how obvious it was that Tavi was the secret heir from the moment of his introduction and every subsequent scene afterwards, though this isn't hinted at until the second book and not outright stated until the third. I also thought Tavi's immense power was upgraded too easily once his grandfather died. Sure, he was given a Great Fury to train him and hone his skills and provide emotional baggage and plot relevant details because his grandfather couldn't anymore. Once he arrived in the battlefield though, he felt far too powerful, and it never really felt earned and seemed to counter everything that the previous 5 books had been building up to. Up until that point, he had prided himself on being powerless and finding creative solutions to solving all of his problems. Except now he just has a giant magical hammer, essentially, that he just swings around. It's a bad metaphor, but it works here. The worst part is that Tavi, the main protagonist, is directly responsible for the world's destruction. Sure, there are other factors like the rampant corruption across the globe, as well as the villains who are the direct actors of said destruction. However, more so than anyone, Tavi's 2 actions within the first book led to the world almost ending, as well as tens of millions of lives being destroyed. Those 2 choices were accidentally waking up the Void Queen through his actions and preventing the Aqua Teen's coup. Compared to the alternative, the Aqua Teens wiping out everyone in Calderon Valley and taking over the country in the aftermath might have been a better outcome. At that point in the series, they were corrupt, though they seemed like they would be fair rulers. And in fact, Lord Aqua Teen was given rule over the country because they needed his battle tactics by the 5th book. I believe they would have been harsh and admittedly biased rulers. Still, that regime change would have provided the consistency needed to prevent the upcoming civil war and allow the country to stand united against the invading forces. And yet, Tavi decided to go out for help and enter a forbidden forest to do so, where he then woke up a monster. My opinion is of course flawed and due largely to the fact that I hate the Hidden Prince trope. Also, in order for this alternative to work, Tavi would need to fail or willingly sacrifice everyone he knows and loves in the Calderon Valley. That's not something a hero would do, so my suggestion is inherently flawed and would not work for the story. Also, the forest appeared to be waking, so the Void Queen might have escaped within a century or 2 no matter what Tavi did. His actions, though, and the precise time when they occurred, allowed the Void Queen to escape during a time of civil unrest as Gaius clung desperately to power. So the Void Queen was able to maneuver within the various political factions vying for power, as well as the Canem and other invading forces who wanted an ally. Worse, Gaius' dying command was to relinquish power and rule to Lord Aqua Teen. So 4 books later, the Book 1 villain succeeded and proved to be a just defender of the kingdom during their brief time as ruler until they sacrificed themselves. Next up is Mount Gyrados. Gyrados is an incredibly powerful Pokemon who evolves from the useless Magikarp. What that means is if you take the time with a useless Pokemon, you get rewarded with one of the greatest of Generation 1, Gyarados. This is another instance where I was disappointed in what actually happened. I knew for multiple books that the Great Fury of Gyrados Mountain would be pivotal at some point in the story, because you don't name drop something that specific and that powerful without intending to use it somehow. Having Mount Gyrados be right outside Tavi's hometown and having Tavi start the series as a Magikarp, I saw one inevitable conclusion. Unfortunately, Tavi never truly mastered Mount Gyarados and tamed it to his will. Instead, it was a force of nature that was just happening during the final battle. The first book ended with a fight in Calderon Valley near Mount Gyrados. When the Great Fury wasn't used, I thought it odd, but understood to mean that Tavi wasn't ready to claim the magic powers he clearly possessed, despite all evidence to the contrary at that point in the series. In the final book, the heroes are losing ground constantly across the country, and they get pushed back to Calderon Valley. I thought surely this was a chance for Tavi to do something no one else had done, and tame a Great Fury, Mount Gyrados. After books of build-up and the scenes I envisioned in my head, the results were less than I expected. Tavi's fight on top of Mount Gyrados was impressive, though he never tamed the Great Fury, so it was like he was fighting next to a natural disaster for added drama and nothing more. Shifting to the balance of magical elements, I felt that certain elements were redundant or clearly more powerful than others. Earth, wood, and metal can all be used to strengthen a person's resolve and physically make them more powerful. Earth and wood in particular can also be used to sense people in the surrounding area in a very similar manner. Aside from raising defensive barriers and hurling boulders, Earth crafters felt limited in terms of combat. I'd also argue that metal crafters suffer from this imbalance between the elements. Sure, they are incredible at close range, especially with a sword in hand, though I feel that the best metal crafter would lose handily to a decent fire crafter with a death beam, or a water crafter by drowning them, or an air crafter by suffocating them, all done safely from a distance. Thus, the basic Pokemon rock, paper, scissors formula didn't feel like a match for the magic within Codex Alera. Interestingly, the series had multiple counterpoints, where somebody who was a water crafter lost to a fire crafter when the fire crafter superheated the air and took out all the moisture. So somebody who would be expected to win, the water crafter dousing the fire crafter's flames, lost because of a creative use of the magic system itself. I enjoy when magic users find new innovations to break out their expected spells. Codex Alera continued to surprise me with all new ways for the magic to be used. Now, as with any fantasy series, here are my thoughts on the plot armor within the Codex Alera. The first book ended with multiple characters being on the verge of death or seeming to outright die, though in the next chapter they were healed and survived. As the first book started with one of those fake outs, I learned very quickly that any sense of drama by somebody's death was non-existent thanks to plot armor. Several characters died on page only to be healed later by a powerful watercrafter, or the death scene was an illusion and the watercrafter is now living under a new identity. There was a constant stream of watercrafters in every battle, so whenever somebody interesting appeared to die, I was never emotionally invested in that scene and saw the obvious solution of how they would be brought back. Had even one of these main characters died, these fake outs would have been more believable and I would have been invested in the danger faced by the heroes. In my opinion, if Tavi had been killed off in the second or third book, heroically of course, and someone like Amara had replaced him as the primary protagonist and even secret heir, that would have been an interesting story to tell and would have gotten rid of any inherent plot armor. Along with plot armor, there were some extremely contrived situations, such as in the first book when the plot was based around the ownership of a dagger to prove the identity of a traitor. Whether the heroes reclaim the dagger never made any sense to me. I understand that seeing the dagger is proof that there is a traitor within the royal house, as that dagger belonged to a specific person. However, sacrificing their lives to try and reclaim the dagger after it had already been given away, that never made sense to me. Lord Aquitaine gave his dagger as a sign of friendship to the Marat leader so that he would invade Calderon Valley. That's about it. Had the heroes brought the dagger to the First Lord as evidence, Lord Aquitaine could have easily lied his way out. There's nothing directly tying Lord Aquitaine to the Marat aside from the dagger, and all that means is hearsay. With or without the dagger, which could have easily been stolen, the heroes still know that the Aquitaines instigated the war with the Marat. I don't see why physically having the dagger, especially if it was taken from one of the Marat leaders, would point the finger directly at Lord Aquitaine more so than their suspicions and hearsay would. Hypothetically, if they do go to a court or something like that and say, hey, I got this dagger from the Marat leader, Lord Aquitaine just has to deny it and say, sure, it was stolen, or no, you didn't, I wasn't there. And that would be the end of it. That being said, Lord and Lady Aquitaine were engaging villains. I enjoyed reading their ploys for the throne and fall from grace, only to have Lord Aquitaine rise as a redeemed villain, and Lady Aquitaine become wildly powerful and completely in over her head. Then there were several events across the series which were played as mysteries, which should not have been because they were far too obvious. As early as book 2, based on scenes with the First Lord and First Lady, I assumed that she was poisoning him. They were in a loveless marriage, and it seemed to be more than just old age that was hindering the First Lord, despite his fury-fused strength. She seemed odd in a few scenes, combined with the hints she helped poison other rival ruling lords. When it was later confirmed all the way in book 5 that she was poisoning Gaius, I was disappointed how something I thought so obvious turned out to be true. Worse, she was poisoning him during a civil war, putting her own life in danger. Except Gaius pities her when he finds out. There was no rage, no vengeance, no comment about how she hit him when his country needed him most. Gaius was understanding more than anything. His response amounted to, well, of course she's poisoning me. Why wouldn't she? I have a lot of other thoughts and notes about odd moments across the series, but I can't go through them all here without making this video last far too long. So instead, here are my list of unanswered questions asked within the story. Starting with, how did Isana, Tavi's mother, become so powerful? Over the series, Isana's power exponentially grew until she was able to compete on a level of extreme power reserved for the ruling class. The series looked like it was ready to give us a Last Jedi moment where anybody could possess incredible power and become the hero, except the series never went anywhere with this. Isana's incredible power was driven by need to save those around her, certainly, and that makes sense, though no one else who had a similar need ever gained such incredible power. She may have gained some hidden power as her husband's dying wish, though that was never outright stated, and if it were true, this power should have manifested years before the series began. It would have been a fascinating theme to shatter the caste system by showing how anybody could wield powerful magic, or by having Tavi never gain magic yet still be a successful ruler. There was even a scene in the first book where the farmers, who were looked down on as being magically weak, were able to join forces with the heroes and raise their defensive walls to be a formidable protection. This could have been further explored by giving other heroes similar power boosts based on need or connection to the land. Specifically, the Furies, who are manifestations of said land, could bond better with those who respect it and reward them with more power. Next up, where do Furies come from, and why have they only shown up relatively recently? One of the books outright asked this question, as it showed how 200 to 300 years ago, there were no Furies. We watched how a Great Fury was created by combining pieces and stones from all over the land into a single mosaic, yet we never got an explanation for why Furies suddenly came into being mere centuries ago. This question was kind of posed in the second book, and I think explicitly asked in the third book, and we saw how a Great Fury was created in the fifth book, so I assume that this answer would be present to close out the series. Given how often the series drew attention to this question, it feels like its greatest unanswered mystery. Finally, how were the Vord stopped last time? The Vord are an ever-evolving insect-like race of monsters that combine many science fiction tropes. From the xenomorphs and aliens to the aliens in Independence Day. Every race in the series has vague rumors about the Vord, which implies a combined effort to stop them the last time and trap them in an isolated forest in the corner of the map. Here are my Vord lightning round unanswered questions. How do all cultures across the world have rumors about the Vord yet avoid contact with each other? How were the Vord last stopped? Why were the Vord not fully purged, and why have they been sleeping for so long? As these questions go unanswered, these feel like convenient world building that goes against and conflicts with everything we know about the Vord. Going back to the various races interacting together, how did the Marat and Ice People's chieftain know each other? There was an entire country between them. Neither race seemed seafaring, nor did they seem long-lived, yet when we saw them on page, they knew each other personally. I only ask these questions because I want to know more about this world and its people and its stories. It piqued my curiosity, yet a lot of these questions, the big ones at least, remain as unanswered mysteries. That's all I have for the Codex Alera. I'm Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. If you enjoyed my spoiler-filled analysis of the Codex Alera, please press those like and subscribe buttons. Let me know in those comments if I missed a major question about this series. Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong? I post my running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter as Running to Write, So be sure to follow me and join in with your own thoughts. Don't forget to sign up for the Writing to Write monthly newsletter for regular updates on my assorted musings, pitfalls, and lessons learned. You get the first 2 chapters to the sequel to Falling Through just for signing up. Do you want to see all the mistakes I made while filming this episode? As an added bonus for signing up to my newsletter, I'll be including links to my outtake videos. These are F-bomb laden, so you've been warned. I'll be incorporating these links in my Ko-fi page first, and then distributing them through the newsletter a month or 2 later. See you next time. Until then, I still say check out this great fantasy epic known as the Codex Alera.